My name is Sarah Mitchell. I'm 30 years old and I paid for my brother's entire wedding, the venue, the flowers, the catering, even the gown his fiancée picked out. Every last detail had my credit card stamped across it. And then one night, a text message buzzed across my phone that split me open like glass under a hammer. "You don't really fit the vibe of the wedding. We hope you understand." I stared at the words until my vision blurred. My own brother. The same Ryan Mitchell I had carried on my shoulders since we were kids. His fiancée Chloe smiling somewhere behind that message, knowing she'd cut me out with a flick of her manicured nails. My hands shook so hard I almost dropped the phone. My chest burned with humiliation, with rage, with something I couldn't even name. My parents brushed it off. "Don't ruin his special day, Sarah." My brother smirked when I tried to call. Like I was nothing, like I would fade quietly into the background as I always had. But what they didn't know was that this wedding wasn't Ryan's. Not really, not legally, not on paper. It was mine, and I was about to remind them exactly what that meant. Before I continue, I want you to pause for a second. Tell me where you're watching from. I love knowing the city or country you're in. And if you've ever felt betrayed by family, if you've ever been pushed aside or treated like you didn't matter, then hit that like button and subscribe. Stories like mine aren't just drama, they're warnings, they're lessons, and sometimes they're the only way we remind ourselves we're not alone, because what happened to me could happen to anyone. And trust me, you don't want to miss how this one ends. I grew up in a house where favoritism wasn't whispered about. It was painted across every dinner plate, every photo frame, every holiday morning. My parents never said Ryan is our favorite, but they didn't have to. It was in the way my mother's eyes lit up when he scored a single point in soccer while my perfect report card barely earned a distracted nod. It was in my father's booming laugh when Ryan cracked a joke even if it was cruel while my quiet comments slipped past unheard. One night when I was about 9, I remember sitting at our scratched oak dining table in the Denver suburbs. The smell of roast chicken filled the room buttery and warm with steam fogging up the little kitchen window. Ryan, 2 years younger than me, bounced in his chair bragging about his miracle goal at the school soccer game. Mom leaned over her face, glowing like he'd just won the World Cup. "That's my boy," she said, piling extra mashed potatoes onto his plate. Dad clapped him on the back so hard Ryan almost spilled his milk. Meanwhile, my plate sat half empty. I had gotten first place in the spelling bee that same day, beating out kids 2 grades ahead of me. I had the ribbon stuffed carefully in my backpack, waiting for someone to notice. But no one did. Mom reached for the green beans, passed them around, and kept listening to Ryan's story. My stomach clenched with hunger and disappointment, all at once. I stabbed a lonely carrot with my fork and swallowed the hurt with it. I told myself it was just one night, but one night became every night. By the time I hit high school, I had stopped waiting for recognition. I worked late shifts at a grocery store to save for college while Ryan coasted on mediocrity. I still remember one winter evening when snow pressed heavy against the windows, muffling the world outside. I came home exhausted, my hair smelling faintly of produce aisle lemons and detergent. Ryan was sprawled on the couch, video game controller in hand. "Sarah, give me some cash," he said, eyes still glued to the screen. "For what?" I asked, my voice flat. "Going out with the guys." I hesitated, clutching the $20 bill I'd earned that night. It had taken hours of scanning groceries, hours of aching feet. Dad walked in, then his face already red from whiskey. He eyed me with that disapproving tilt of his chin. "Don't be selfish, Sarah," he said. "He's your brother." The words landed like a slap. I pressed the bill into Ryan's hand, watching his grin stretch wide as he bolted out the door. My chest burned with resentment, but I told myself it's just money. Family comes first. What I didn't know was that this habit, me sacrificing him taking, would never end. College should have been my escape. I worked harder than anyone I knew, landed scholarships that paid for almost everything, and dreamed of studying abroad in London. But when senior year rolled around, my parents sat me down in the living room, the TV flashing blue light across their faces. Ryan hovered behind them, silent, but his eyes darted toward me. "Sweetheart, Mom," began softly. Ryan made some mistakes with money. Credit cards, a car loan. He's drowning. My stomach dropped. Dad leaned forward, his hands clasped like a man delivering grave news. We know you've been saving for your program overseas. But you're his sister. He needs help. I remember the way the words, he needs help, echoed. No one asked me what I needed. No one asked about my dream. I drained my savings account the next day, watched the numbers flicker on the ATM screen until they flatlined at 0. Ryan hugged me quickly like he was embarrassed, muttered thanks under his breath, and then disappeared with the money. I stood outside in the icy air, my breath white against the night, and felt something inside me crack. I didn't know it then, but that crack would widen with every passing year until there was no bridge left between us. Holidays became their own battleground. On Christmas morning, when I was 22 and already working full-time, I sat cross-legged on the floor near the tree. The scent of pine needles mixed with cinnamon candles. Wrapping paper rustled as Ryan tore into a box containing a brand new laptop sleek silver top of the line. "Wow," he exclaimed. "You guys are the best." I peeled open my own box to find a used cookbook, pages already stained with someone else's grease. Mom smiled, patting my shoulder. "You love cooking, don't you?" I forced a smile, but inside something twisted bitter. It wasn't about the laptop. It was about the message. Ryan deserves investment. You deserve scraps. Every year, it repeated. Thanksgiving photos centered around Ryan carving the turkey, even when I was the one who had spent hours in the kitchen. Birthday cakes with his name in frosting, while mine came from a store shelf misspelled. I told myself I was fine, that it didn't matter, but it carved deeper than I thought. By my mid-20s, I'd learned how to disappear in plain sight. It's a skill people like me pick up without meaning to when you're useful, but not celebrated. You become air everywhere necessary and unseen. I worked my way into marketing at a mid-size events company downtown, the kind with glass walls, citrus-scented lobbies, and whiteboards full of color-coded timelines. I loved the work because it was honest strategy in results out receipts attached. When a ballroom looked magical under Edison bulbs, when a timeline hit to the minute when guests left, talking about how seamless everything felt, I knew which invisible hands had made it happen. Mine. On Friday nights, after a week of vendor calls and mood boards, I sometimes drove alone through Capitol Hill, with the windows cracked just enough to pull in the smell of rain on hot pavement. I'd pass church basements setting up for bingo and diners with neon signs flickering open, even when the light inside said otherwise. Denver can feel like a small town if you let it. I let it. The smallness made me believe I could keep my life contained, controlled. I didn't know it then, but control would become the only thing I had left to hold. Ryan drifted through jobs the way leaves skitter across sidewalks quickly, aimlessly, always at the mercy of the next gust of wind. He'd come over late smelling like beer and cheap cologne flop onto my couch and talk big about startups he might join or ideas he might sell. He'd take a slice of the pizza I bought and say, "You're lucky, Sarah. You always know what you're doing." Then he'd ask for a short-term loan that turned long and indefinite. Once at 2 a.m, he texted me a photo of a parking ticket and wrote, "Bail me out, I swear I'll pay you back." I went downstairs in an old sweatshirt hair scraped into a knot heart thudding and found him leaning against my car, grinning like I'd saved the day. I wanted to believe he would grow out of it. I wanted to believe the next chapter would be different. A memory from before the cracks widened keeps returning to me. We were 17 and 15, huddled in a corner booth at a coffee shop off Colfax, the air sweet with cinnamon and steamed milk. Ryan had a bruise on his cheekbone from a stupid backyard dare with the neighbors. I had a split lip from the volleyball court. We pressed napkins to our faces and swore, almost solemn, that we'd always protect each other. "You and me," he said, tapping the table twice like a pact, "no matter what." I tapped back. In the soft hum of espresso machines, it felt unbreakable. I didn't know that promises can be as thin as foam on a latte, pretty warm, gone in a few minutes. Work became the place where I could keep my promises to myself. I was the one who could untangle a contract clause as if it were a knot in a string, who could predict to the minute when a florist would run late because of a road closure, who knew which baker could deliver a cake through a blizzard. When my boss pulled me into a glass-walled room to praise a campaign that doubled RSVPs, I nodded grateful, but a quiet ache tugged at me anyway. At home, being capable made me responsible for everyone else's mess. At work, being capable finally felt like power. That difference mattered. It would matter more than I realized later. Holidays still tasted like separate plates. Thanksgiving lived in the clatter of carving knives and the wet sound of gravy ladled onto Ryan's plate first, always first. Mom would tilt her head at him, cooing, "You work so hard," even when he hadn't had a job in 3 months. Dad would pass me the rolls without looking up. At 26, I found myself in their kitchen on a snowy afternoon, the window fogged from a pot of simmering cranberries. Aunt Grace stood near the sink, drying a dish with slow, circular motions, watching my mother glide around Ryan as if he were the axis our holiday spun on. "You know," Aunt Grace said softly, like a thought she was testing out loud, "sometimes families build myths to survive themselves." I asked her what she meant. She didn't answer. She set the dish down, kissed my cheek, and changed the subject to weather. I didn't understand then that myths have gravity stronger than truth. The first time I realized Ryan could be careless with my name as well as my money came in a whisper. I was paying a utility bill online when an unfamiliar charge stared back at me, a quiet line of numbers weighted with dread. It had my name, my address, except not my apartment, a downtown lease application I had never seen. I called the number on the document, heart banging like a trapped bird. A woman from a leasing office answered, cheerful until I gave her my details. Something clicked in her voice, then cooled. "Oh," she said. "We already approved that one." The co-signer, Sarah Mitchell, right? My mouth went dry. I asked her to email the form. She did. In the skinny font of autofill, my name sat next to a scrawl that wasn't mine. Ryan's phone went straight to voicemail. I stared at the screen until the edges blurred and told myself it was a misunderstanding. I saved the PDF in a folder without a label. I didn't know it then, but that file would be a match waiting for the right spark. Around that time, Chloe started appearing in our family orbit like a planet sliding into view, bright, polished, perfectly lit. She was beautiful in a way that photographed well hair that caught light skin, that glowed eyelashes that cast tiny shadows when she blinked. She worked in brand partnerships, which is a phrase that can mean everything and nothing at once. She laughed at my dad's jokes and brought my mom coffee exactly how she liked it. She kissed Ryan with the kind of devotion that makes everyone else feel like an audience. When she shook my hand, the first time her palm was soft and cool, her eyes flicking down to my blazer as if gauging its price. "You plan events," she said. "That must be handy." The word hung between us like a chandelier that could drop at any second. There was a Sunday cookout when the air felt heavy with heat and the smell of charcoal soaked into everything. Dad stood at the grill in a Denver Broncos hat, flipping burgers and squinting through smoke. Music thumped from a speaker on the patio, too loud, the bass making the plastic cups on the table tremble. Chloe handed me a stack of paper plates, her smile so bright it almost blinded. "Could you set these out?" "You're so organized." Ryan slid an arm around her waist and whispered something that made her throw her head back and laugh. I watched the way their bodies curved toward each other, the way my parents floated around them like moths to a porch light. Useful. That's what I was. I set the plates down, fixed the crooked tablecloth, and swallowed the smallness. I didn't know it then, but Chloe's smile could cut. At work, the fall weddings were stacked like dominoes. I'd leave the office at 9 with a tote full of vendor lists, fingers ink-stained from notes. On one of those nights, fog drifted across the street like breath on glass. I stopped by the old coffee shop off Colfax, the one with the booth where Ryan and I made our pact. The booth was occupied by a couple whispering into the low light. The barista had bleached hair and a nose ring. I stood at the counter, the hiss of the milk wand in my ears, and thought about how time folds a place into something new while leaving the outline the same. I sipped too hot coffee and imagined the life I almost had in London. The ache was there, old and familiar, but different now, mixed with something like steel. Regret can be a knife, but it can also be a spine. Mom called more often as Chloe settled in. "Isn't she darling?" She'd say, drawn out and dreamy. "She and Ryan are thinking about a big wedding. Imagine the photos." I pictured them, without meaning, to White Runner gilt chairs, Chloe's cheekbones reflecting the camera flash Ryan's arm firm around her like he owned the moment. In the background, me, if I was there at all, carrying a clipboard, adjusting a centerpiece, a ghost in good lighting. One late afternoon, the sky turned the bruised purple that Denver gets before a storm. I drove to my parents' place because Mom insisted on family dinner, and guilt is a root system that thrives even when you cut it back. In the garage, a cardboard box sagged on a metal shelf, the tape split from humidity. I reached for it to keep it from falling, and it crumbled into my arms, spilling papers that slid across the concrete like leaves. Receipts. Old bank statements. Envelopes stamped in red letters, past due. Mixed in were notes in Ryan's messy handwriting calculations that didn't add up a crumpled copy of a car loan with my father's signature tight and shaky at the bottom. Beneath those, a small stack of letters with my name typed neatly on the line next to reference and guarantor. Letters I had never seen. My skin prickled. I gathered everything with shaking hands, tucked it back into the box, and set the box upright on the shelf. I told myself it wasn't the time. Dinner was waiting. Mom's roast, Ryan's smile, Chloe's perfume. But I felt the shift a new weight settling in my chest like a coin dropped into a jar. I didn't know it then, but I had just put my fingers on the thread that would unravel everything. Inside the living room glowed orange from a floor lamp. The TV murmured sports highlights. Chloe balanced a glass of white wine on her knee and watched my mother as if memorizing her moves. Aunt Grace arrived with a casserole and a tolerant smile. Uncle Peter stomped in behind her, shaking snow off his boots, even though it hadn't started yet. At the table, conversation slid around me like oil. Ryan told a story about a meeting with a big investor while Mom touched his wrist and Dad laughed too loudly. I passed the salt. I tasted nothing. When Chloe turned to me and said, sweet as syrup, "Sarah, would you ever help us with a venue?" "You're so good at this," my mother lit up like a candle. The room tilted. My fork clinked against the plate. "We'll see," I said, because the old version of me was still on duty, still paying, still stepping in. The old version of me didn't know she had an expiration date. After dinner, while Mom wrapped leftovers in foil and Chloe posted a filtered photo of her wine glass to a story, Aunt Grace touched my elbow. "You look tired," she murmured. "You've been tired for a long time." I told her I was fine. The lie tasted like copper. She looked at me the way people look at a painting they suddenly recognize, with a small start, with a kind of fear. "Be careful," she said. "Careful of what I asked." She lifted a shoulder. "Of who you save." She left before I could ask what she meant. I didn't know it then, but the house was a stage, and we were already in the last act. I just hadn't read the program. I drove home through streets slick with the first sprinkle of rain wipers squeaking radio low. The garage box wouldn't leave my mind. My name where it shouldn't be. Numbers that swallowed other numbers. Promises made in a coffee shop booth while foam melted on top of a latte. I gripped the wheel until my knuckles ached and thought for the first time in years that maybe I didn't have to be the air in the room. Maybe I could be the storm. The thought frightened me. It thrilled me. It carved deeper than I thought. When Ryan and Chloe finally announced their engagement, the air around our family shifted like a current. It was at my parents' house on a crisp September evening, the kind where the Denver sky looked painted in stripes of pink and gold. Mom had lit candles on the dining table, their glow bouncing against the china she reserved for special occasions. I remember the scent of rosemary chicken filling the room, the crackle of the oven still in my ears. When Ryan cleared his throat, took Chloe's hand, and said, "We're getting married," the room erupted. My mother gasped and clasped her hands like she'd been waiting her whole life for this exact moment. Dad actually stood his chair, scraping loudly across the floor, and hugged Ryan with tears brimming his eyes. Chloe flashed the ring its diamond, catching every shard of light like it had been designed for performance. My relatives clapped, Aunt Grace whispered, "Oh my," and Uncle Peter muttered something about finally. I smiled too, because that's what was expected. But behind my teeth, something sharp pressed something I couldn't quite name. No one looked at me. No one remembered that I was the one who'd kept Ryan's head above water for years, that half the stability leading up to that night had been paid for out of my pocket or carved out of my opportunities. Instead, the Mitchell family mythology was alive and well. Ryan was golden, Chloe was dazzling, and I was background. The weeks after their announcement, Chloe began consulting me, though it felt less like asking for help and more like sliding responsibility across the table while calling it a compliment. She'd tilt her head and say, "You're the pro Sarah. You know venues better than anyone. Can you just make a few calls?" Her nails tapped against her phone as if the work would do itself. I remember sitting in my office late one night, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, the smell of stale coffee clinging to the air. My inbox was full of contracts not for clients, but for Ryan and Chloe. Willow Creek Manor, Bliss Catering, Petals and Pine Florals, each deposit tied to my credit card, each confirmation sent to my email. I had always been precise with numbers, but that night, watching them pile up, I felt dizzy. Tens of thousands of dollars all mine. I told myself it was family, that maybe this was my chance to be seen finally. If I gave them the fairy tale, maybe the story of me, the invisible sister, would be rewritten. Maybe for once, I wouldn't just be air. One evening, a florist called me directly, voice cheerful at first. "Miss Mitchell, we just need final confirmation on the archway arrangement." I froze. "What archway arrangement?" Silence. Then a cough. "Oh well, Mr. Mitchell added some extras. We assumed since it's all under your account." My pulse thudded in my ears. Ryan hadn't said a word. I asked how much. The number made my throat go dry. That night, I confronted him in the kitchen of our parents' house. The overhead light flickered, casting shadows across the chipped linoleum. He leaned against the counter, smirking. "You can afford it," he said. "That's not the point," I snapped. His smirk deepened. "Don't ruin this for me, Sarah. Just be the reliable one like always." The words landed heavier than they should have. Reliable. That was my role. That was all I was. Thanksgiving rolled around before I'd processed it. The house smelled like sage stuffing and pumpkin pie. Relatives crowded into the living room, laughter bouncing off the walls. Chloe floated among them in a cream sweater, looking every bit the perfect bride-to-be. I was carving turkey because Ryan didn't want to ruin his hands before the wedding. Cameras flashed. Mom announced proudly, "Our Ryan's big day is coming." Sarah's helping, of course, she's so organized. Everyone nodded, smiled, turned back to Ryan. I felt heat crawl up my neck. No one asked me how much I was sacrificing, what I was giving up. I had been passed over for a promotion at work because I kept leaving early to meet vendors. I had drained my savings again this time, willingly, stupidly. And yet, at that table with gravy cooling on my plate, I realized in their eyes I was just the unpaid assistant in Ryan's show. Later that night, as the house quieted, I wandered into the garage for air. The box I'd stumbled across weeks earlier still sat crooked on the shelf. This time, I opened it fully. Inside were letters I hadn't seen before, ones Ryan must have hidden. Applications for loans, a scribbled note that said, "Sarah will cover it." My name forged. My chest tightened. This wasn't just carelessness. This was theft dressed up as family duty. I stuffed the papers back, my hands trembling. Above me, the garage light hummed. I whispered to the silence. Not anymore. But I didn't act. Not yet. The final straw didn't come from Ryan. It came from Chloe. Weeks before the wedding, while I sat at my kitchen table littered with vendor receipts, my phone buzzed. A message lit the screen. "Hey, Sarah, just a heads up. We're keeping the wedding really small and intimate. Hope you understand. Thanks again for everything." I read it 3 times. My chest felt hollow, my throat dry. I called Ryan, straight to voicemail. Hours later, he texted back, "It's nothing personal. You just don't fit the vibe. Hope you're not mad. Hope I'm not mad." I stared at the words until they blurred into streaks. My breath came shallow. My parents' response when I begged for outrage, Mom's voice calm, cold. "Don't ruin his special day, Sarah. Let it go. Let it go." That night, I sat in my darkened apartment, the city lights blinking outside my window, every receipt spread across my table like evidence in a trial. My heart pounded, not with grief anymore, but with something sharper, colder. Every contract was in my name. Every deposit was mine. The entire fairy tale was built on my shoulders. I leaned back, eyes burning, and whispered to myself, "They think I don't fit the vibe. But without me, there is no vibe." I didn't know it then, but the Sarah who swallowed hurt, who wrote checks in silence, who let herself be air. She ended that night. Something new rose in her place, something they had never seen before. The first sign that the wedding wasn't mine to witness, only to fund, came like a draft through a closed window, thin at first, then sudden and cold. My mother invited me over for just a quick thing with the planner, and I showed up in a navy blazer, straight from work, laptop in my bag, timelines ready. When I walked in, the living room hummed with voices, a low chorus spreading out from the dining table. Gold-rimmed water glasses, place cards, a stack of swatch books. Chloe's laughter light bright, just a little too rehearsed. Ryan looked up, then looked down like he'd misread a cue. "Oh, hey," he said. "We already started." Mom fluttered toward me as if to catch a falling vase. "We thought you'd be tired. Didn't want to bother you." I set my bag down very carefully. I'm the one paying. And confirming. Bother me. Chloe slid a sheet of vellum across the table to my mother without turning. I think the hand-torn edges feel editorial. "Then to me, with syrup on the edges, we didn't want to dump logistics on you. You work so hard." "Logistics is my job," I said, "and this is my account." A silence fell sharp enough to hear the kitchen clock's second hand, a dry tick-tick-tick. Ryan cleared his throat. "We'll loop you in." Loop you in. As if I were an intern they might CC if they remembered. I smiled the way you smile at a camera you hate and took a seat. I watched them talk around me about photo moments and brand of love phrases that sounded like magazine captions, not a marriage. When I asked about the seating chart, Ryan's jaw clenched. Chloe traced her fingertip over a sketch. "We're thinking the family side should be curated." She glanced up. "You'll get it when you see the photos." I held her gaze. "Where am I sitting?" She blinked once. "We'll let you know." After that night, the air around me changed, charged, like the minute before a summer lightning strike. At work, I buried myself in crisp tasks, the kind that obey rules. Red Clause 14. Negotiate delivery windows, build a run of show that could survive a power outage. My colleagues Tessa and Miguel noticed the tightness at my mouth that even concealer couldn't soften. "You're doing your brother's wedding?" Tessa asked, hovering by my desk with 2 coffees and the citrus-clean smell of the lobby clinging to her sweater. "I'm bankrolling it," I said. "And apparently I'm optional." Miguel cocked his head. "Optional doesn't pay deposits." I told them about the contracts, the florist, the venue, the designer dress, numbers that felt theoretical when typed on a screen, but thudded like bricks when you stacked them. Tessa set a coffee in front of me and dragged a chair close. "Make a binder," she said. "Everything PDFs, emails, signed pages, and highlight who the contract holder is." "Why?" "Because when people pretend you don't exist, paper is the loudest you can be without raising your voice. It was a joke, but not." I built the binder that night. The hum of my printer filled the apartment. The room smelled like hot toner. I slid each page into a sleeve, Willow Creek Manor contract holder, Sarah Mitchell. Bliss Catering, primary contact, Sarah Mitchell. Petals and Pine billing, Sarah Mitchell. My name lined up like marching soldiers. If I tilted the stack just right, it flashed under the lamp like the edge of a blade. 2 days later, my phone rang between site visits. An unknown number with a familiar area code. "Miss Mitchell." "This is Hannah from Petals and Pine. We've got final specs from Mr. Mitchell on the floral arch ranunculus peonies, 200 stems of garden roses. Beautiful vision." Her voice tripped over beautiful like it was expensive, and it was. "I didn't approve any changes," I said. "Oh, well, the additions are under your account," she said, paper rustling. "We just need your okay. How much are the additions she told me?" I stared at the crosswalk light blinking orange and thought I could almost taste copper. "No," I said quietly, "nothing else without my signature. Send me the itemized change order." When I called Ryan, he picked up on the 3rd ring. Background noise, music, laughter, the clink of glass. "What?" "You added $5,000 to flowers." He chuckled like I'd told a story. It's a wedding. Don't be cheap. It's my name. Sarah, relax, he said, drawing out the syllables until they snapped. You're good for it. Later in my parents' kitchen with steam fogging the window and Chloe perched on the counter like a lifestyle ad, I tried again. Stop adding to my account. Mom's dish towel stilled midair. Don't make this about money, sweetheart. Dad leaned in his chair, a half smirk that felt like a warning. Try not to ruin this. For once. For once, I repeated the words dry as dust on my tongue. I'm the reason there is a this. Chloe's smile touched only one corner of her mouth. We'll be careful, she said. Promise. I don't know which was worse, the promise or knowing exactly how little it was worth. After midnight one Friday, my phone buzzed on the nightstand. A message window lit the dark Chloe. People like you don't belong in our photos. I sat up the room, tilted pulse loud in my ears. People like you. Reliable, unpretty off-brand. I typed and deleted 3 replies. Finally, I wrote, got it. Then I turned my phone face down and stared at the ceiling until gray morning smudged the corners of the room. The next week, the boutique that sold Chloe's gown called to confirm final payment authorization. Payment authorization from whom I asked. From you, the clerk chirped. We have the form signed. I never signed a bridal authorization. A pause. Paper shuffled. Well, we have Sarah Mitchell on file. I drove there with my mouth tasting like pennies. Inside, the air was perfume and tulle. Mannequins floated like ghosts in lace. Chloe stood at a mirror veil, pinned eyes lidded with smug sweetness. When she saw me, she didn't flinch. We're almost done, she said. Isn't it perfect? I walked to the counter and slid my ID across. Show me the authorization. The clerk handed over a photocopy with my name and a signature that looked like mine if you squinted a leftward drag at the end, the M a little too fat. A forgery meant to pass quickly under a distracted eye. I kept my voice level. Remove my card. Any remaining balance must be paid by the bride. Chloe lifted her chin. We were going to reimburse you after the wedding. Then you can reimburse the boutique. Her eyes hardened for the first time, something cold swimming up from the pretty surface. Don't be petty, Sarah. This is bigger than you. Not on paper, I said, and took a crisp photo of the forged form with my phone. In the grocery store a day later, Aunt Grace pushed a cart beside mine, the wheels squeaking, the fluorescent lights humming. We paused by a tower of canned yams. She studied my face as if trying to read small print. You know there's a bridal party group chat, she said carefully. They're calling it Inner Circle. I waited. They don't know I know. I saw over Madison from accounting's shoulder at church. She lowered her voice. They said you can be logistics, not optics. She placed a can in her cart with a little thud. I probably shouldn't have told you. No, I said, and the word came out steady, almost gentle. You should have. At home that night, I opened the box in the garage again, in my mind, the red-stamped envelopes, the cosigner lines with my name, the shaky signature in my father's hand. I spread new papers across my kitchen table, the bridal authorization, every invoice, the florist's add-ons. The lamp buzzed. The room smelled like old coffee. I created folders with names that sounded like spells, authority, liability, forgery. I printed the email where the venue manager had written, as contract holder, you have sole discretion over final approvals. I circled sole discretion in red. The rehearsal dinner was set for a Thursday at a brick-walled restaurant that served cocktails in cut crystal and piped Sinatra over the clink of ice. I arrived on time. My name wasn't on the table. The hostess glanced at the notes and said, family only, with a smile that wasn't her fault. I texted Ryan. No reply. When I turned to leave, Uncle Peter caught my sleeve outside, breath fogging in the cool air. You okay? He asked, voice coming out gruff because tenderness embarrassed him. I'm great, I said, and surprised myself with how much I meant it. The kind of great that happens when a decision clicks into place like a puzzle piece you'd been holding upside down. On the drive home, Colfax blurred past in a string of neon and tail lights. I parked, climbed the stairs 2 at a time, and set the binder in the middle of my table like a centerpiece. I didn't raise my voice. Paper would be loud enough. I didn't know exactly how the ending would look, But for the first time, I knew who would write it. It carved deeper than I thought. The message that made everything simple came at 11:13 p.m. The apartment was quiet except for the tick of my wall clock and the radiator's occasional sigh. My phone lit my face in cold blue as Chloe's words arrived like a door slamming. "We're keeping the wedding small and intimate. You just don't fit the vibe. Hope you understand." I set the phone down as if it were hot. Silence is a strange animal. It can yawn huge and empty, or it can press down hard on your chest until you forget how to breathe. This was the second kind. I stood, walked to the sink, ran the tap just to hear something alive. When I came back, the screen had gone dark again. I didn't respond. Not to her. I opened my laptop. I began with emails that looked like any other subject lines, tidy, salutations, cheerful. I searched for the word authority, then cancellation, then holder. I dragged every relevant thread into a new folder titled Wedding Control. Then I dialed the venue from my call log. The manager, a woman named Jules with a voice like polished wood, picked up on the second ring. "Hi, Jules. This is Sarah Mitchell, the contract holder for the Bennett Mitchell wedding." "Yes, Sarah," she said. "What can I do for you? I want to confirm Clause 12 cancellation without third-party authorization. That's still in effect, it is. Non-refundable deposit, but all other charges are reversed if canceled 72 hours ahead, and any changes or vendor access require my approval." "That's correct." "Please send me a PDF of the signed contract initialed pages included." Of course. I could hear her keyboard clicking. The sound washed through me like a tranquilizer. Paper obeys, paper doesn't gaslight. Next, Bliss Catering. A chipper man answered on speaker and introduced himself as Mark. I pictured him in a polo back-of-house clatter behind him. As the contract holder, I said, "I need a clear statement of your termination policy." He told me. I had read it already, but hearing it matters. Voices make things real in a way black ink can't. I didn't cancel. Not yet. I was building a runway and I needed to understand exactly how long it was. I sent a text to Tessa hypothetical in a personal contract if the holder cancels because that is not specified, but no services have been delivered, and vendor access is limited by holder any exposure. She pinged back a minute later with a lawyer's email, her cousin Alex. "He'll talk for 10, no charge," she wrote. Alex called while I paced my kitchen phone warm against my cheek. I gave him the clean version. He gave me the clean answer. "If it's your contract, your deposits, your approvals, and no services rendered yes, you can shut it down. You'll eat deposits. You could argue forgery regarding the dress, don't confront alone. Document everything. If there's a threat, call me." The word forgery slid through the phone like a silver fish, quick, slippery, undeniable. I opened the photo of the boutique form, again zoomed in on the shaky M, and saved it twice. At 1:07 a.m., I wrote a single-line email to myself. "You are not the heir." I didn't know why I needed it. I only knew I might later when the room filled with smoke. Morning made everything look sharper. Sun cut across my table and turned the binder's plastic sleeves into sheets of light. I put on my blazer, tied my hair back, and drove to my parents' house because some wars you fight face to face, even if you already know the outcome. Mom was arranging napkins in a basket like it was a sacred task. Dad sat with a crossword and coffee brow furrowed. The familiarity of it made my hands shake. "They uninvited me," I said. Mom didn't look up. "They want it small." "Small with 200 guests," I said. "You've seen the RSVPs." Dad set his mug down slow. "Don't make this difficult, Sarah. I'm not making it anything I said. I'm stating a fact. I'm the contract holder. If I'm not welcome, my account isn't either." The room changed temperature. Mom's eyes snapped to mine. "Don't threaten your brother." "I'm telling you how the world works," I said. "How paper works. You taught me to be responsible. This is responsibility. I'm responsible for these contracts, and I'm withdrawing my approval." Dad leaned back, smirked. "You wouldn't dare." I smiled. "Watch me." Upstairs in my old room, the posters gone and the bedspread replaced. I took photos of the garage box contents one by one with my phone on burst mode. Red stamped notices. Lines with my name typed neatly beside guarantor. I flattened every page with my palm so the camera would catch the details, dates, account numbers, signatures. When I left, Aunt Grace stood by the front door as if she'd been waiting for a cue. "Does he know you know?" she asked. "He will," I said. "Be careful," she whispered. "Even golden boys bleed when you cut the story." On the drive home, I dialed Ryan. He didn't answer. I left a voicemail anyway, my voice almost bored. "You forged my authorization. Remove my name from any account not already paid. Do not add charges. I will cancel anything you touch. This is your notice." He texted back 3 hours later. "You're insane. Don't ruin this. Chloe's crying." I typed deleted. Then stop mistaking my restraint for permission. The next 48 hours were a choreography only I could hear. I emailed Jules at the venue and asked her to restrict access to any vendor not accompanied by the contract holder. I told Bliss Catering to place the order on hold pending written confirmation from AP, which was me. I asked Petals and Pine to freeze production and deliver nothing to any address besides the one on file mine. I changed the pickup contact for the rentals to my own and moved the delivery window by a day, a shift that seems small on paper but collapses dominoes in real life. I didn't need to swing a hammer. I needed to tilt the table and let gravity work. In the middle of this, Chloe called me for the first time since the midnight text. Her voice came sugared and brittle. "Can we talk?" "We're talking," I said. "You're being dramatic," she said. "This is about aesthetics. You know curation. You forged my name." A pause. It was a misunderstanding. It was a crime. "I'll pay you back," she said quick. "After the wedding. You'll pay the boutique now," I said. "And you'll stop speaking to me like I'm your assistant." Her breath hissed through the line. "Why are you doing this?" "Because I was uninvited," I said lightly. "And because you forget who built the room you're trying to stand in. The day the rehearsal should have happened, I booked a city hall slot that I knew Ryan could switch into if he had to, because revenge isn't only about ruin. Sometimes it's about choice. Offer a door, make sure they see the wall behind it." I told no one. I printed the confirmation and slid it into the back of the binder. By then, the family grapevine had learned to text. "Cousin Julia. Heard you're not coming, so sad, Uncle Ray." "What's the deal? We already bought tickets." "Mom, please, Sarah, don't humiliate us." The word us made me laugh in my empty kitchen. Humiliation is a funny tide. It only seems to flood the people who never learned to swim. Miguel knocked on my office door with a donut the morning before the wedding. "You look like a general," he said. "Please tell me you're letting them step on the mine they buried themselves." "I'm letting paper do what paper does," I said. "And if they call you a monster?" he asked. "Maybe monsters are just people who finally stopped bleeding for everyone else." When I finally pressed send on the cancellation emails, it wasn't dramatic. It was 3 clicks, my index finger steady. Venue terminated per clause 12. Catering service voided, deposit forfeited. Florist production stopped, delivery rescinded. Rentals pickup canceled, credit returned to card on file, the one that belonged to me. Each confirmation chimed back like a muted bell. Clear, clear, clear. I told no one for 6 hours. Then I texted Ryan. "Check your voicemail." He called, breathless, furious. "What did you do?" "What the contracts allow," I said. "You're ruining my life." "Your choices are," I said. "I'm just refusing to bankroll them." He went silent long enough for me to hear his heartbeat in the static. "Please," he said, finally, voice raw. "Just this once." "Just this once is how we got here," I said. "You have a city hall slot at 4 tomorrow. The confirmation is under your name. Take it or don't." But the ballroom is gone. He made a sound I'd never heard from him before, something like a cracked note, a plea caught on a jagged edge. "Why are you doing this to me? I'm not doing anything to you," I said. "I'm doing something for me." When I hung up, the apartment was so quiet I could hear the hummingbird thrum of the refrigerator. The binder lay open, pages glinting. I thought of the booth on Colfax, the foam heart latte, the double tap on the table our packed. I thought of the garage box, the forged M, the used cookbook that stood in for love. Grief is not the opposite of anger. Sometimes they share a spine. That night I slept well for the first time in months. The next morning my phone began to vibrate as if it were alive, call after call, text after text. Aunt Grace, Uncle Peter, numbers I didn't recognize. The subject lines bloomed in real time. Venue is dark. Do you know what's going on? Chairs food. Anyone I watched them stack and let them pass. I made coffee. I buttered toast. I stood by my window and looked at the light on the neighboring brick like it had done something right just by existing. When Mom's name flashed across the screen, I answered. "What did you do?" she whispered as if the walls might be listening. "I canceled my contracts," I said. "The ones I paid for. The guests are here," she said. "People are crying." "Good," I said. "Now they can feel something real before the photos. Sarah," she breathed, and I heard the myth cracking tiny Fisher's hairline at first. "Please?" "You taught me to be responsible," I said. "I am." I ended the call before she could fix her voice into the shape that always made me back down. I turned my phone face down and listened to the kettle click off. Outside, the neighbor's dog barked twice and settled. Somewhere in the distance, a siren rose and fell. The world kept doing what it does. The wedding would not. And still, even then, some part of me held a door open. 4 o'clock. City Hall. A clean end if they wanted it. A lesson if they didn't. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for a story that has lied about you is to stop playing your part. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is nothing at all. The morning of the wedding rose too bright, too calm, as if the sky had no idea what was about to unravel beneath it. Denver sunlight spilled through my blinds, the air crisp with the first hint of fall. I brewed coffee slowly, deliberately, the smell filling my apartment bitter and grounding. My phone buzzed before I had even taken a sip. "Aunt Grace, Sarah, what's happening? The parking lot's empty." "Uncle Peter, we showed up early. Doors are locked." "Where's the staff, Cousin Julia? Are they doing this somewhere else? Tell me you know." Each message stacked like bricks, building the silence I had crafted. I carried my mug to the window and looked out at the street below, leaves skittering across the pavement, dogs tugging their leashes, a jogger with earbuds running past all ordinary while 1 mile away chaos was blooming. By 9, my mother called. Her voice broke on the first word. "Sarah." I said nothing. "They're saying the venue was canceled. The coordinator said your name. Your name." "Did you—" "I didn't do anything I wasn't allowed to," I said. My tone was even like reciting a weather report. "Clause 12. You can ask Jules. You're ruining this family," she hissed, but her voice trembled. "No," I said. "I just stopped bleeding for it." I hung up before her silence could pull me back into the old role. At 10, photos began floating through the family group chat. Images of relatives in pressed suits and glittering dresses standing bewildered in a parking lot, the golden gates of Willow Creek Manor closed behind them. Chloe's college friends posed by a bare oak tree, confusion painted on their faces. A cousin captioned it with a single word, empty. I could almost hear the murmurs. Did they cancel last minute? Was there an accident? Did Sarah really? Whispers became theories. Theories became accusations, all circling back to me. My chest tightened, not with guilt, but with a strange exhilaration. It was happening. The fantasy had collapsed into dust right on cue. By 11, Uncle Peter left me a voicemail, his voice thunderous even through static. "I told your father this whole thing was a joke. Now look, people drove in from Kansas City, Sarah. They're furious. Do something." I saved the voicemail without listening again. His anger wasn't mine to fix. Around noon, Ryan finally called. His voice was frantic, cracking around the edges. "What the hell did you do?" "What the contract allowed," I repeated. "There's no food, no chairs, no flowers. Guests are leaving." "Chloe's." His breath hitched. "She's in the bathroom crying." "Do you know how this looks?" Like the truth I said. "You're sick. I'm free." He went silent, and in that silence I heard something I'd never heard from him before, desperation that stripped him of shine. At 1, Chloe called. Her voice was hoarse mascara, probably streaking those perfect cheekbones. "Please, Sarah. Please, you can fix this. Call them back. We'll beg you. Just make it right." I let the words hang between us. I imagined her sitting in a silk robe somewhere, nails biting into her palms, the weight of her curated world collapsing. "You told me I didn't fit the vibe," I said softly. "Now you know what no vibe feels like." She choked on a sob. "We'll pay you back. Anything. Just please." "Pay the boutique first," I said, then ended the call. By 2 messages flooded in faster. Guests who had flown across the country packed their bags early. Uncle Peter's second voicemail nearly growled, "They're moving to City Hall. No reception, no photos. Just paperwork." I leaned back in my chair binder open in front of me like scripture. The pages glowed under the afternoon light proof that control had always been mine. I thought of little Sarah at the oak table ignored while Ryan got second helpings. I thought of teenage Sarah draining her savings for his debts. I thought of 22-year-old Sarah opening a box of overdue bills stamped in red. Every version of me had carried weight. Today, I had dropped it on him. At 3:30, I walked into City Hall. The marble lobby echoed with hurried footsteps, voices hushed but sharp. Guests in gowns and tuxedos clustered in corners whispering. The air smelled faintly of disinfectant and wilting flowers someone had carried in as an afterthought. Ryan stood near the clerk's desk, his suit rumpled tie askew hair, damp with sweat. Chloe clutched a bouquet of supermarket roses, her eyes swollen from crying. When they saw me, a hush rippled across the room. Ryan's jaw tightened. Chloe's lips trembled. "You came," she whispered, almost reverent. "I wanted to see how it ends," I said. The judge shuffled papers, his monotone cutting through the room, as vows were exchanged without music, without grandeur. Guests shifted uncomfortably in their seats, the scrape of shoes against marble loud in the sterile silence. The fairy tale had shriveled into bureaucracy. Halfway through the doors opened. A man in a charcoal suit strode in, a thick envelope in hand. I recognized him immediately, the catering manager. He walked straight to Chloe and Ryan and extended the envelope. "You'll want to review this," he said flatly. Chloe's fingers shook as she tore it open. Her face drained of color. "Termination fees," she whispered. "Thousands." Gasps scattered through the guests. Ryan swore under his breath, eyes darting around like a cornered animal. The manager's gaze flicked to me briefly, then back to them. "Maybe next time, treat the right people with respect." He turned and walked out, his footsteps echoing like a gavel. Silence pressed down heavier than any applause could have been. The judge cleared his throat, rushed through the remaining vows, and pronounced them married. No cheers followed, just an awkward shuffle as guests filed out, their whispers sharp as knives. I stood smoothing my blazer. Ryan finally looked at me, his eyes a storm of shame and anger. I leaned close enough that only he could hear. "This is what happens when you forget who's really holding it all together." Then I walked out, the marble echoing beneath my heels, sunlight spilling through the doors like freedom. Outside, the autumn air hit crisp and clean against my skin. I could still hear fragments behind me, Chloe sobbing, my mother murmuring something about humiliation, Uncle Peter's growl about wasted money. But out here, the noise faded. For once, I wasn't the background. I wasn't the girl with the ribbon. No one noticed the student who gave up London, the woman who funded other people's dreams. I was the author of the ending. And I wasn't done yet. I didn't go straight home after City Hall. My hands were still trembling, not with fear, but with a voltage I couldn't shake. I drove through downtown Denver with the windows cracked, the cool September air slicing across my face. Horns blared, neon signs flickered. People hurried along sidewalks with bouquets or briefcases in their arms. Their lives moved forward, ordinary and untouched. Mine had just detonated. I parked outside an old diner on Colfax, the kind with chipped red booths and coffee that tasted like burnt earth. I slid into a corner, ordered black coffee, and pulled the binder from my bag. The waitress gave me a curious look when she set down the mug, maybe because who brings a stack of legal contracts to a diner? I didn't care. I flipped page after page, my name stamped on every single one. The thought kept circling, they wanted me erased, but they built everything on me. And now I held the ruins in my hands. I thought of Ryan's face when the catering manager handed him that envelope. Shock first, then fury, then something else, a kind of hollow collapse I had never seen on him before. For the first time in our lives, he wasn't golden. He wasn't the hero. He was just a man who had used too much and lost everything. And Chloe trembling beside him in that bargain bouquet looked less like a bride and more like someone who'd realized she had gambled her image on the wrong card. But even in that satisfaction, a quiet pulse of unease pressed inside me, because it wasn't just their wedding I had destroyed. It was a myth. The story my parents had fed the family for years that Ryan was brilliant, destined, chosen, while I was background, crumbled in one public hour. And myths don't die quietly. My phone buzzed again. Aunt Grace. Her text was short, almost reluctant. Maybe we were wrong about you. I stared at it until the letters blurred. Wrong about me. What did that even mean? That I was crueler than they thought, smarter, stronger. I finished the coffee, the taste, bitter and metallic, and drove home. The apartment was quiet, but it no longer felt lonely. It felt like a war room after the first victory, silent, heavy, waiting for the next move. I spread the documents across my table again. In the corner was the boutique authorization, the forgery. In another folder, the photos of overdue bills from the garage box. And on my laptop, the PDF confirmations from every vendor cancellation. Together they formed more than revenge. They were leverage. Because here's the truth, Ryan had signed my name before. More than once. I hadn't said anything then, but now I had proof. If I wanted, I could take it to the bank, to court, to his employer if he managed to keep one. He'd think today was humiliation, tomorrow could be ruin. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling, the hum of my refrigerator the only sound. A strange calm settled over me. They thought they had ended me by excluding me from their fairy tale, but they hadn't ended anything. They had only handed me the sharpest weapon of all proof. Out the window, the city lights blinked awake one by one. Somewhere Ryan and Chloe were sitting in their apartment, sifting through the ashes of their big day, probably blaming me, maybe blaming each other. My parents were likely fielding angry calls from relatives scrambling to spin the story to salvage their myth. And I was here in the quiet with all the cards in my hand. The question wasn't whether I'd use them. It was when. I closed the binder, slowly slid it back into its sleeve, and whispered to the empty room. This isn't over, because it wasn't. Not by a long shot. If you've ever felt like the outsider in your own family, if you've ever given everything only to be told you didn't belong, then you know the sting I carry. But you also know the power of finally standing up and saying no. My story isn't just about a ruined wedding, it's about breaking a lifetime of silence. And trust me, this isn't the end. There's more to uncover, more to fight for, and more to say.